Hey friends, welcome back to the Big Talk podcast. I'm your host, Tricia Brouk, founder of the Big Talk Academy, award-winning director, producer, and author, and this is episode 509. This week, I am in conversation with the incredible Chandler Bolt, and I cannot wait for you to hear what he has to say about leaving your legacy. Chandler is the CEO of Self-Publishing School and selfpublishing.com. He's also an investor, an advisor, and the author of 6 best-selling books, including his most recent book titled Published. Chandler hosts the 7-Figure Principal podcast and the Self-Publishing School podcast. And through his books, podcasts, and YouTube channels and Self-Publishing School, he has helped thousands of people write a book that grows their income, impact, and business. All right, everybody, let's do this. Chandler, I am so excited to have you on the Big Talk podcast today. Welcome.
Tricia, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. We had the opportunity to be together in Toronto a couple of months ago at Gio's event, Archangel event, Changemakers, and it was such a pleasure to sort of meet you there. We were both busy talking and speaking, so I'm glad that we have today to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too. We were doing big talks.
We were doing big talks from big stages. Let's go back. I always like to ask my guests to take us back and tell us what their backstory is. And you can go as far back as you'd like, Chandler, to bring you to this point in time with me today.
Yeah, so I'm a college dropout and a C-level English student with ADHD who ended up writing and publishing books and creating a publishing school. And so kind of that's my backstory is I dropped out of school because I was tired of learning how to run a business from professors who have never ran businesses. That didn't make sense. And I'd ran businesses and I never imagined that I would start writing books. But when I dropped out, I kind of fell in love with books as a reader. And I believe a book is a $15 mentor. It's the smartest, most successful people have written a book. And for $15 and a handful of hours, you can learn from them. And so I started falling in love with books as a reader, but then also as an author when I launched my first couple books. And that ultimately led to creating Self-Publishing School and now selfpublishing.com. And then fast forwarding to today, we've published about 7,000 books in the last 8 years or so. And that's led to Inc. 5000 a bunch of times, Forbes 30 under 30, a bunch of stuff like that. But that's kind of the progression.
That's amazing. So you're clearly leaving a legacy and creating this library of work. Before we go into that any deeper, take us back a little bit, right? When did you fall in love with books as a kid? Were there some books that you loved as you were growing up that really have stood out and that you continue to go back to?
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because I didn't fall in love with books as a kid. And so I was one of those kids where, I would be in some advanced classes, but not the English ones, because the English ones, you had to read a bunch of books and you had to write papers. And I was not good at either one of those things. And so it was really kind of when I dropped out of school that I kind of adopted what I would call the college dropouts approach to learning, which is I got to operate like I'm still in school, but just change the mechanism of learning. And so instead of showing up to lectures or that sort of thing, go to conferences, go through courses and read books. And really books were the primary thing. So I think not to dodge your question, but really I just didn't fall in love with books as a kid. It was more so when I started running and scaling my business, I realized that any problem I have in my business, there's a book on it. And there's probably a bunch of them and there's some really good ones. And so then I just started pairing up and saying, all right, what's the biggest problem in my life or in my business that I'm trying to solve right now? Now let me go to people who have done what I want to do and ask them what's the best book on this thing, and then just read it and implement it. And then I just keep doing that over and over and over again. And so I think that's kind of led into, the scouting report probably, well, at least growing up, probably still to this day is, hey, Chandler's not like the smartest or most naturally gifted person, but he just works hard and is very coachable. And so I read books and then I implement it. And so that's kind of been my secret sauce as a business owner.
I love what you said about working hard and being coachable. I think that's so underrated and overlooked by so many business professionals. When you think about how you have now created this empire, if you will, and have been able to give so many people an opportunity to use their voice inside of publishing. How do you feel about your voice and using your voice and all of the voices you are giving legacy to?
Mm. I mean, it's a driving factor of why we do what we do and why I'm get so excited. Because I think about, we already talked about the books change lives piece. They change the lives of authors and they change the lives of readers. But when you think about using your voice, like I I coined this term. It's called leveraged impact, and so a leveraged impact is the ability to do work once. You create this book, and then this book goes on to impact thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people, right? And so I'm using my voice in a way like this book, but then this is what we do with our authors, where you crystallize your voice, which is really hard, and it's it takes a long time, and it can be frustrating and it can be tedious, but you crystallize it, and then now when you publish that book, it's there and it's part of your legacy. If I die tomorrow, this book will still be here, right? It might be at a Goodwill, but it'll be here. And so when I think about, I think about books as using my voice at scale. Now, there's a bunch of other things like, we both do speaking and, podcast interviews and a bunch of stuff like that, which I think is really helpful. But I think when it leads to something that can make a deeper impact, like a book, where somebody can read it and reread it, or I can really sit with them for a period of hours in a way that I can't on a podcast interview or in a talk or in whatever else. I think it makes it just even more significant. And it takes your voice from one to one to one to many,
Mm.
which, yeah.
There's something extremely intimate about writing a book. Do you find that true?
Oh yeah. You've got to crystallize what you believe. It's like one of the hardest things ever, is because when you're writing it before, it was just spinning in your mind and you weren't forced to crystallize it into the written word, probably, unless you're just writing all the time. And so I think that's one of the hardest things about a book, is that there are times when you're writing where you have to say, well, hold up, what do I actually think or believe on this thing? Because I'm about to put it in print. And when I put it in print, I mean, my name's on it and I'm putting it out in the world. So I should stop and think about this. And so it crystallizes a lot of thought. And then for me, with the most recent book, it it forced me to do the hard work of creating frameworks, like
Mm.
memorable frameworks, and synthesizing the information that I was kind of disparately teaching all over the place. It really forced me to say, all right, what is like a methodical approach that's step by step and that's streamlined, and so that I think is a real value, because then now my business is benefiting from that. Everything that we're doing is benefiting from me taking the time to do that, and I wouldn't have done that if I wouldn't have done the second edition of published.
Unpack a little bit for me, Chandler, how you crystallize what you think when you write a book.
Yeah. So the core of the process, I'll go big picture and then I'll go in the weeds. So big picture, like I look at writing a book as this kind of like an 8-step process. There's these 8 milestones, which I know a lot of people probably can't see this, but it's on the Amazon page of the book. There's an image there too. That's the image that I'm explaining here. But there's these 8 milestones. The first 4 are what I call the more writing method. So mind map, outline, rough draft, and editing. And then there's the final things of, professional editing, cover design, formatting, and launch. But crystallizing ideas, that all happens in this more writing method, which is the first 4 steps. So I mind map everything I could think of for the topic of the book. I use that mind map to create an outline for the book. And then I use that outline to write the book one chapter at a time. So I'll mind map, outline, write the chapter, mind map, outline, write the next chapter, and just keep repeating that process. And so that's kind of like the big picture structural way that I write and crystallize those ideas. And then there's something that I try to be way more intentional about on my most recent book, because I just felt like I did a poor job of it previously, which is creating memorable frameworks. And so that's where I tried to think, all right, I'm teaching this concept. Is there any way that I can make this into a framework, into an acronym, into something that's memorable? And I think that's that next step that will make, we get ripped off all the time, and everyone who's written a book thinks they can teach about how to write a book. And so we just have a lot of like, it's a very competitive space. And so I want to say, hey, what are these frameworks that are originally mine that I want, if people are going to teach them elsewhere, that they at least point back to me, because it's a framework that I created. And so that's kind of how I thought about it. And so that's creating something like the 4 P's of a best-selling book: person, pain, promise, price, or something like the launch triangle, like the 3 elements of a successful launch. Like, I was kind of already teaching, or the more writing method. Like, I've taught that for years, but I never created a framework. It was like the mind map, outline, write kind of method, but it wasn't really made in a way where you can say, oh, got it. Remember that acronym? Yeah, mind map, outline, rough draft, editing. Got it. And so just a bunch of little things like that where I try to be intentional with this newest book.
I love it. And when somebody comes to you, we're talking about legacy here as well. When you're teaching somebody these frameworks, you're enabling them the ability to leave a lasting legacy as an influential
Yes.
voice. And that is such a powerful tool to provide. When you think about somebody who comes to you and says, okay, I want to publish a book, you've published over 7,000 books using this process. How do you choose who to work with?
Mm. It's kind of what we talked about at the start a little bit, is they got to be coachable. They got to be willing to put in the work. Um,
What does it mean to put in the work? Define that for me.
yeah, great question. So we look at it as, I mean, there's the fast track and there's the slow burn, and both are fine. Some people want to come in and I publish their book in 90 days or 6 months or something that's really fast. And then some people say, hey, I don't care about how fast I do it. I want to
Well,
keep
let's
going consistently. Yeah.
let's go back for just a second for our listeners who may want to explore publishing and 90
Yeah.
days, 6 months. Why is that fast? I know it's fast too, but I want you to tell us.
Yeah, great question. So traditional publishing world is pretty much a minimum of 2 years. You think you've got to write the book, get it edited, have a finished manuscript, format that book, create a cover, and prepare and then launch the book. And so those are all components that can take a really long time. And so 90 days is very fast. Um,
And back to the regular publisher, the
mhm.
traditional publisher, there's tons of back and forth.
Yes, yes, yeah, and just arbitrary limits in the publishing world as well. So that's why that's fast. But to directly answer the question you asked before that, what does it look like to put in the work? It's a couple things. It's like you've got to commit to writing the book and then marketing that book. Now, and that those both take time, money, and energy, right? And so it's for us, it's a minimum of 30 to 60 minutes a day for 90 days in a row, and you can definitely finish a rough draft in that. You can even potentially finish a rough draft in 30 to 45 days. But if you're going 60 minutes a day every single day, 7 days a week, like, now that is not a requirement to work with us, but that's certainly a requirement if you want to get your rough draft done in 90 days, or if you want to get it done in 30 to 45 days. And so that's what it means to put in the work. And then you have to be accountable and responsible for the marketing, which a lot of people, like, we help with that. We teach that. We have best practices, like all that. But at the end of the day, no one cares about your book as much as you do. And whether you're traditionally published, whether you're self-published, whether you're hybrid published, doesn't matter. You as the author are responsible for marketing that book. And you're going to want to delegate it. A lot of people hate marketing, myself included. I used to hate it, and I've learned to love it. But you got to learn to become friends with Sam, which is a really great person. It stands for sales and marketing. And so you got to learn to love it. You don't have to like it, but you do have to learn it. And I think that's just so important as an author, that people know that, because we think that, hey, I'm just going to pay someone to market the book. It's not going to work. And on the flip side, if you build it, they will not come. You have to tell them about it. And
That's
telling
right.
them about it is becoming friends with Sam.
I love that. And so back to coachable, choosing speakers who are going to do the work. Are there specific topics that are on or off limits for you?
Great question. No. So we actually believe that for us, because we are kind of flying the flag of self-publishing, that we put the power back in the hands of the authors. And so it's a tough line to walk. But with my staff, it's like, it is not our job to pick books or to pick topics. It is our jobs to find winning authors and support them and help them be successful. Now, I may disagree with what they're writing about. It's not my job to agree with them. It's my job to help them. And so I think that's where in the publishing industry there's so many gatekeepers, and there's so many people that have historically just decided what gets published. And so we have taken the stance that we will not decide what gets published on a topical basis. We help authors succeed. And again, that could be against my beliefs, that could be against the beliefs of some of my staff, but that's not our job. Our job is to help people be successful with their books.
That's amazing. I think that's something that you're touching on with the big talk and our values. We truly believe in dignity, respect, effective communication, collaboration, community, humility, and love. And it doesn't mean we all have to have the same opinion. It means we have to all
Right.
respect one another.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
I love
If
that
you
you,
disagree, read the book, right? There's something to be said where I think it doesn't happen enough in the world that we live in is productive, respectful disagreement.
I
So
love
what
that.
better than reading a book on a topic that you disagree with? Because you might read
Absolutely.
it and find out that you have more in common, or at least you will be more informed on that topic, and then you can decide whether or not you agree with it afterwards.
I love it. When you bring in new authors who really have a strong point of view and they're really clear that at the end of this, the success is to have a published book, and all of a sudden they run into limiting beliefs, how do you support them there?
Uh, Tough love and good accountability. I mean,
What
I
does your
always
tough love look like, Chandler?
so we try to pair people up with coaches that kind of fit their style. And so we explore that in the process of starting to work together and say, hey, do you need someone who's more of a cheerleader? Do you need someone who's more of um, uh, a tough love person? Um, and, uh, and pair them up based on that so that we can hold them accountable and encourage them in the way that they want to be encouraged. But I always kind of jokingly refer to what we do as this kind of like a mix between Indiana Jones and Jillian Michaels. Like it's our responsibility to Indiana Jones. We're going to blaze the trail. We're going to save people a ton of time and money in the process and help them get to a better destination. But then Jillian Michaels, we're going to hold them accountable to do the work. And sometimes that means when you're saying, hey, I don't want to work out today, or in our case, hey, I don't want to write today, it's you paid us money to hold you accountable. And because this book matters. And so a lot of times people will get 60 days in and they'll say, oh, I don't know, maybe it's not the right time. I've kind of fallen out of the habit. Maybe I need just to put this on hold. And so it's really lovingly challenging that and saying, you started this for a reason. Let's go back to what you said, why this is important when you started, and let's get back on track and let's start making daily consistent progress again.
I love that. That's why they need to be coachable.
Yes. Yes.
Share some of your success stories with our listeners and our viewers, Chandler.
Yeah. I mean, for your audience, like we've got a lot of speakers that have had a ton of success with their books. So I've got one kind of business example and then one heartfelt example. The business example is a guy named Mike Acker. He wrote a book called Speak with No Fear. And as he's created a whole bit, he had quit his multiple six-figure job and has written multiple books, created a whole company on that series of books, helping speakers, and all that started from his book, which is really cool. And then one of my favorite stories though is an 8-year-old named Emma Sumner, and her dad did a couple books with us, and he's a physical therapist. And then she saw him do that, and she said, "Hey, Dad, I want to do that." And she did it. And so she published a book. It's a kid's book. It's called The Fairies of Waterfall Island. And the book made $4,000 in the first 3 months. She did her first speaking gig and made $1,200. That was at her school. They paid her, I think it was a $250 honorarium, and then she sold a bunch of books. and so just like an example of her life as a young woman is forever changed because she wrote a book and because her dad did that. And so I think that's it's an encouragement for kids. Like we've had a bunch of kids inspired by her story that have ended up writing books, but then also for parents in the sense that your kids are watching and they see you take on these big goals. And so when you do something like commit to a goal of writing a book, they're probably paying attention and they'll follow suit.
I love it. For everyone who's listening and watching, remember to ask to be paid when you speak. Emma, the 8-year-old girl, was paid to speak at her school and then sold books. So everybody, just ask. You're worth
Yes,
it and you deserve it.
absolutely.
Amazing. Amazing. You're giving so much possibility and potential to these business owners. What does that mean to you in terms of I know your legacy is all of these books, but how does that make you feel?
Hmm. I mean, it's very encouraging. I I believe that business is the best tool for good. And so I love doing it. And the business has gotten to a point where I really don't have to work, but I choose to because I love it, and I believe that I have God given abilities that in the area of business, like this is the way that I can make a massive impact in the lives of others. And when you run a business, you have the ability to improve the lives of your customers, improves the lives of your employees, and in doing so and creating that value, you create a profit, which can improve the lives of your family. And also, like we do a bunch of nonprofit stuff, and so like that's a whole other ripple effect. And so I think it's very meaningful, and it's cool to be able to impact like this ripple effect through my team, through our customers, through authors, and then leverage impact. It's thousands of people for every book that we publish, and so it's a lot of fun, and I love it.
I love that you love it. And I think what you're doing is incredible, Chandler. And being able to have this kind of an impact and to give people who may not have the avenues to publish their books this opportunity, it is just such a massive credibility builder. And it's just incredible work.
Thanks for saying that.
You're welcome. You ready for some fast talk?
Let's do it.
What's your favorite book? That's going to be a hard one.
My book published. No, I'm just kidding. Uh, Probably Extreme Ownership, Jocko Willink.
Amazing. Who's your favorite speaker and why?
Favorite speaker? That would probably have to be TD Jakes. He's so
Nice.
good. And
Why do you,
why?
why do you,
I think he has a great ability to uh, be motivating, have clear, concise messages, but then also be able to reach a totally diverse audience. And just the way that he deep dives on that, where there's the person in the back row, there's a person in the front row, there's the person from all different socioeconomic, racial, whatever, like different areas of life, and he can just reach people in a way that is just unreal.
amazing. How do you memorize when you take a big stage, Chandler?
Who I don't really. I'm probably too over reliant on slides. That's like my kryptonite as a speaker. I come from doing webinars, so I'm just way too reliant on slides. Eh, I like big bullet points and then being able to unpack that. The only time I've ever really memorized was for my TEDx talk. That was really hard. And so I tend to, like my 3 points, my three stories. Here's my opener, here's my closer, and here are kind of the pieces within that. And I feel a lot of freedom in that and feel like I can um, both not forget things, but then also deliver well.
Right. Well, when you did memorize for your TEDx talk, how did you do that?
It was hard. A bunch of iteration, a bunch of deadlines and crystallizing it, and then I had to just deliver it a bunch of different times. And so that was one of the only times I've had to do that. It was really hard, and I think I got in my head because I'm like, because in your mind, oh, I missed that sentence. No one knows, but and then you're like, oh crap, I need to. And so I just felt like my delivery. I think it was helpful, it was useful, and I'm so glad that I did it. Um, and I think my delivery maybe wasn't as good as it could have been, and but it's necessary. Like it's 12-minute talks, you got to nail it. It's got to be pretty crystal clear.
Yeah, I think what you're saying makes perfect sense. You just have to do repetition. It's just over and over again. Yeah. All right. What do you do the day before you speak, whether it's on a podcast or a big stage?
Hmm. I'm a day of kind of guy. I mean, it probably comes from school, but I mean, sleep well. I don't eat the morning of, and I review my slides. Or I don't eat before I talk. Typically, I love speaking in the morning. So I want to wake up, prep, have nothing on my stomach, have good energy, and then get out there and deliver.
Amazing. And what podcast are you currently obsessed with?
I really only listen to one podcast. It's called the All In Podcast. I mean, besides my podcast, I don't listen to it, but I do it all the time. But that's Self Publishing School podcast. But All In Podcast, that's really the only podcast I listen to. I listen to every single episode every week. It's awesome.
Awesome. And we're going to put all of this in the show notes, everybody. You have something special for our listeners here at the Big Talk, Chandler.
Absolutely. So I'd love to. If you're curious about writing a book, check out my new book. It's called "Published: The Proven Path from Blank Page to 10,000 Copies Sold." We've created a link where you can get this on Amazon. You can buy the audiobook on Audible. If you like podcasts, you probably like audiobooks, and I read it, so that's a kind of a way to continue the conversation. But if you'd like a free physical copy of the book, go to publishedbook.com/big talk. Okay, publishedbook.com/big talk. The first 50 people that go there, we're going to send you a physical copy of the book for free, no strings attached. Okay, so all you have to do is go to that page and fill out the form so we know where to send it. No shipping costs, no nothing. We'll cover everything.
Amazing. That is so generous. Thank you so much. And we are going to put that link in the show notes as well, but it is publishedbook.com/big talk. Chandler, thank you so much for being a featured guest today on the Big Talk. Where can our listeners get in touch with you specifically?
Yeah, so I'm kind of old school. I'm only on Facebook and I'm not there that much, but you can find me there. And then if you want to learn more about working with us at Self Publishing School, just go to selfpublishing.com/apply, book a call with the team, and we can see how we might be able to help. And then I do a group coaching call every week. So you can hop on if we end up working together and chat with me directly that way.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today and for dropping in. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe bell and notifications so that you get our newest videos. Everybody, follow me on Instagram. Hit me up there if you have any questions. Remember, your voice matters. Big love, everybody.